Welcome to the Modern Adolescence podcast. I'm so glad that you're here, and if you're returning, thanks for coming back. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I'm really excited about, and I think when talking about mental health in teenagers is something that definitely should not be brushed over or is very relevant to kind of what teenagers go through, and that's burnout. On the second episode of Modern Adolescence, I talked to Hannah Weldy about the overwhelming pressure to succeed in high school. And I think going hand in hand with that is we're facing all of this pressure, all of this stress. It's constant 24/7. Burnout is almost inevitable with what we're putting on ourselves. And I think it's important to have that conversation about burnout in teenagers and let teenagers know that they're not alone in feeling the way that they're feeling, and that this is very common amongst teenagers now in the 21st century with all of the pressure that we're put under. So from my research and put kind of into plainest terms, burnout is what happens when you're faced with prolonged, uncontrolled, and unresolved stress. There's no separation in your life. It's just kind of constant on you, and you don't really have the ability to regroup, to do anything else, and it piles up in a way to when you don't really feel functioning. You feel lethargic, you feel just not driven really, and you're kind of just all over the place. And burnout in high school students can have a pretty substantial consequence. Not only does it increase, depression, anxious symptoms, low self-esteem, but there's also a higher risk of dropout, a higher risk of risky behaviors, and underachievement. So burnout really is this serious, not issue, but mental health contributor that really should be talked about more and addressed in a better way. And burnout is a really significant thing that's not only relevant to just high school students, but to adults in the real world. It's this type of situation that isn't necessarily going to go away once we're out of high school, and it's something that's most likely going to morph into something different. And I think it's really important to note that in recent years, in total, there's been a 24% increase in a Google search of signs of burnout in people working than there was prior to 2020. And it's very significant to note that because the current world we're living in is really fueling more stressors and more signs of burnout. And having an honest conversation about burnout and talking about how people handle it and different ways to just recognize it is so important to the next step in realizing how to go on and motivate yourself and not feel that way. So like so many other high school students, I've definitely had my experiences when it comes to burnout and that feeling of kind of lethargy and not being able to quite get the motivation to complete work and just feeling kind of drained. Specifically, I remember freshman and sophomore year, it was very tough. After having that crazy adjustment, which I've talked about before, that crazy adjustment in my freshman year to that new system, I felt like I was on 24/7, and that quickly led to a feeling of kind of just like going through the motions every day, lethargy. It was really, really tough, feeling energized almost. I was so tired all the time and kind of going through the motions. My schedule freshman and sophomore year it consisted of basically school all day. Sometimes I would work out in the morning, and that was a lot too. So either work out or just go straight to school in the morning, go home, feel absolutely exhausted from a school day because I was constantly pushing myself at school, then coming home for an hour, and that was my time to relax, going to a dance class, going to a sports practice after that, coming home at like 9:30, sometimes 10, and then immediately starting on my homework and going to bed. That was the schedule that I created for myself, and it felt like this like everyday cycle, and it quickly went from something that was new and exciting and enjoyable every year to something that was this cycle that was really tough to feel motivated in. And I definitely feel like burnout was something that at the time I didn't really know what was going on. I just felt like I was tired because I wasn't going to bed on a great hour. I was constantly doing something until about midnight every night. But I just felt like, this is just like how I feel, and that's what it is. And it didn't occur to me that that's the symptom of a greater issue, and that I was pushing myself very hard with that sort of consequence. I wasn't really taking time to readjust for myself. And all around me, it really didn't occur to me that other people were pretty much feeling the same way too. Like, obviously, we all had a general understanding that we were all, stressed. At school, we were like, oh, we're all stressed. But the idea that that was negatively affecting us in a way, and that there was a name for it, was something that I feel like really was not talked about. And for me personally, when it came to burnout, I would call it literally almost like a peak of my burnout right before the pandemic. And I specifically remember I had this project that was pretty stressful for me. I had to do an interview for something, and I went and I did that, and I came home. I got my hair done that day too, because that was like the one time I had the ability to get my hair done. So I got my hair done, I did my interview, then I came home. It was like 7, and that was the first time I had been home all day. And I was sitting there, and I had, I think, a history paper due and an English paper due, and I did not have the motivation to do it at all, and it was pretty close to their due dates, and I feel like I didn't really put a dent into it. I had zero inspiration to write whatsoever, and I usually enjoy writing. It was so tough, and I was eating my dinner, and I was just like crying because I could not get myself the motivation to do it. I was go 24/7 all the time, no breaks, and I just felt so exhausted, so done. Like, I was at this point of fatigue where I was not functioning. And then, of course, the pandemic gets called the next day, and everything gets put on hold. And for me, everyone was freaking out about the pandemic and, being alone and like all of the stuff shutting down. Obviously, I was stressed out about the medical side of the pandemic too, and all the tragedy that came with that. But for me, it was almost like, thank God it's done. Like, I'm out of this world, and I'm at my own motivation. And throughout the pandemic, I found that being able to function on my own schedule and take the breaks necessary for me led to more creativity. It led to a better drive that I did not have before. I kind of just felt like I was going through the motions before. Whereas after the pandemic, and even heading back into school my junior year, I felt like I had the motivation and the drive necessary to get my work done. And I felt like I was actually taking in knowledge and learning the right way, rather than before, when I had been going to school because I have to go to school, doing my work because I have to do my work. It just felt like, oh, like that's what learning actually is. And it's not just me that had this experience. And I'm starting to feel now again kind of I talked to also Nikki Random about the adjustment to the 2021 school year, and with this school year being basically normal again, the feeling of burnout definitely is starting to return, and I think that's something that a lot of students can relate to currently, and it's something that we need to talk about kind of as a society or in our schools, about ways that we can handle the constant stress so that we don't end up in a state where we're unable to get ourselves to do anything, because that's not where anyone wants to be. So today I had the opportunity to interview my dear friend Nicole Karadimitriou about her experiences with burnout, her experience throughout high school, and kind of just have a conversation about our experiences and what us as students have felt helps and what could be better going forward from our teenage perspective. So I'm here with my dear friend, Nicole Karadimitriou. Nicole does a lot, I will say. She is our student council president. She's also an officer in multiple clubs. She's also my dear friend. She does a lot in terms of being involved in high school. She takes a very rigorous schedule. So she's kind of the perfect person I want to talk to about this issue in high schools, and that's burnout. So, hey, Nicole, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm very excited to talk about burnout today. So,
I am too.
Yes. So, for you personally, have you struggled with burnout in high school at all?
Have I?
Yes.
Yes, I totally have. And I think it's something that I still sometimes struggle with. I don't think it ever really goes away. I'm definitely working on it, but yes, for sure.
Yeah, and is there a specific instance that kind of comes to mind when you're thinking about high school and like the stress and the pressure that you faced where you really felt burnt out?
I'm not sure that there's a specific instance, more so that it comes and goes in waves, really. I don't think it's ever gotten really bad. There was one point, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where I had to ask for an extension on an assignment because I just had so much going on that day. And I was also sick. I had a cold, so I was physically not well. I really needed to just sleep, and I ended up sleeping into my first 2 periods of school, but like I think I really needed it. I felt so much better the next day in terms of like my cold. And so that was probably like the most, I guess, dramatic it's ever been. That's the most time I've ever taken out of my school day to help myself. But I am glad that I took that time.
Yeah, and for me personally too, it's kind of been, I've been feeling like with my classes, it's kind of just like go, go, go all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's really, I believe, like around now starting to feel very tedious, and it's starting to not, I'm not starting to not have the same motivation that I had at the beginning of the school year.
100%. I think senioritis is creeping up on us.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's always kind of been the case in the sense that I've always had something to do in my classes because I'm taking 4 advanced placement classes, and it's a really rigorous schedule, as you mentioned. There's never really a good time to be missing school. So it either needs to be when I'm in a study, but I have my study 6th period, so I can't even come in late some days. I have AP French first period, which is definitely like I need to be there for school. So I can definitely appreciate the comment about just always feeling like you're on the go, because I totally am.
Yeah, and I know I've known you for a while, but I've known all throughout high school you've been involved with student council and some of your other extracurriculars, but recently you really have this year ramped up your schedule. Have you felt a kind of a difference in how you've been feeling or handling that stress, and has burnout affected you differently?
You know what? I think that, so as you mentioned, this year I am student council president, but with that comes a lot of responsibility to be delegating your work to your peers. And luckily for me, I have 4 amazing officers by my side that I know I can depend on. So anytime I'm like, hey guys, I really don't have time to do this, can someone please take it? They are jumping on the opportunity to do it. I can't speak highly enough of them. And I think differently from previous years where I was learning how to be a leader, how to reach out to people, how to actually put the pieces together of what is a leader. Now I already know that, and now I'm delegating. I'm learning how to delegate. I'm learning how to be a manager, not a leader. So I'd actually think that in Stuco, my work could be, I wouldn't say, it's not lessened necessarily, but it's definitely less stressful in the sense that there's less pressure that I need to be taking things on myself because I know I have so many people I can reach out to. But I definitely am doing a lot of like the PR stuff, like town meeting and meeting with administration. So that I can't necessarily delegate, but I don't mind doing that at all.
Yeah. So for me personally, I feel like at the beginning of the school year, I'm like ready to go. I'm like, you know, feeling like super motivated, like this is my year type of deal. And also near the end of the school year, I feel pretty motivated with the warmer weather and with it ending. But in the middle, it's very tedious. When the winter months come, it's quite tedious. Do you have a certain like time of the year where you know like you're going to be feeling tired, burnt out, versus, you know, another time of the year when you're like, I'm motivated, I can add more to my schedule?
I think that probably like January through March, maybe April. March is the hardest month for me. Just because it's the longest month, or that's what it feels like. It feels like it's a year long. And so I think that's my hardest time compared to, as you said, like at the beginning of the year. I'm so on top of things at the beginning of the year. And I try to set reasonable goals though. I know I can like kind of get ahead of myself in September and August and be like, yeah, I'm going to go home. I'm going to do all my homework in 2 hours and then I'm going to go work out and then I'm going to go eat a salad and do this and this. And it's not necessarily reasonable. So this year I've been setting more reasonable goals, things that I can actually keep up with. Less numerical goals too, like spend 2 hours doing this and then an hour of this and whatnot. So that's how I've kind of been managing that, like midgetating that kind of drastic effect of the different months, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're facing burnout, or if it's that time of year where you're like really stressed out or it's really starting to hit you, what do you actively have like steps that you take for self-care or to kind of just make yourself feel a bit more motivated, give yourself a new drive?
Absolutely. I think that the first step for me is making connections with people that I know and trust. My freshman year, the amount of trusted adults that I had in the building was maybe one. Now I can think of at least 7 people in the building that I can go to, cry to, whatever it is, rant to. And then I also can pinpoint some people that I can go to and they'll be my pick-me-up. I'll laugh with them. I'll have some fun. They'll cheer me up. They'll make my day better. So that is something that I think is so, so important, just making connections with people in the school building, in the school community, because they can really, really help you. And chances are, if you're also going to them and you're struggling in their class and they know what's going on, they'll be a little bit more lenient with you in the sense that they're more understanding. So asking for an extension isn't as huge of a deal as it would be, you know, like you're more likely to not necessarily get it, but just build a nicer connection with your teacher. So that's definitely something that I've been doing. And in terms of self-care, I found that decluttering the space around me helps me so much. Like making my bed in the morning, I try to do that every day. If I don't do it in the morning before I go to school, I'm definitely doing it after school. Because if I'm just in a nice space that's organized, I feel that I can get my life organized. It's something that I have control over. So that also really helps me.
Yeah, and definitely the connections is something that I feel like is so important in high school to kind of talk about. You know, teachers are people too, and I know a lot of school systems are a lot different than our school systems, but I talk about this I think in every episode, but having those connections formed really can help in circumstances where you're not feeling your best. I think it's also important to mention that everyone's method and what works for them to relieve stress and to relieve burnout is different. For me personally, I tend to need a lot of alone time to regroup and kind of reset. And that's also like a valid way of finding like resetting and finding yourself. It's not one specific solution. It's just what feels best for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you don't find it right away either. It's taken me quite a long time to figure out what really works for me. I've tried a multitude of different things. Some people, it's working out. Some people, it's staying home watching Netflix, giving themselves self-care days. And for me, it just happens to be cleaning.
Yeah. So when it comes to your high school experience and kind of what you were prepared for when entering high school and facing this new sense of burnout, what do you feel like you could have been prepped on better? And do you feel like there's something missing when you were entering high school and facing these first challenges?
Yeah, I think freshman year is always very hectic, and I kind of lost my sense of priorities. So I would be making a lot of new friends, which is obviously great for my social health, but sometimes I think I would spend a little bit too much time on that, and I'd lose sense of my academics, which I definitely needed my freshman year to set me off on the right foot. Or sometimes I'd be so caught up in one thing, like trying a bunch of new extracurriculars, that I lost sense of taking care of myself. So it's really just setting you up for a nice balance of things. And I didn't really find that balance until, I'd say, second semester of my freshman year. I'd wish I'd found it a little bit sooner. It's definitely hard to do, and it's not something that you can necessarily be taught before going into it. But I think it's definitely a message to any upcoming freshmen, like, know that you should be finding that balance that works for you, and it's definitely going to be trial and error. You're going to be feeling really stressed out at times, but don't lose that balance that you need. Also, I think that a lot of people, again, like myself in freshman year, was trying out absolutely everything, and I kind of lost a sense of why I'm trying things out. Am I doing it for, I don't know, colleges, my applications, or am I doing it to actually make an impact in my community, an impact on myself? And so again, that was like my freshman year, dealing with that mindset. How am I going to make an impact in the school? And now I think I found that my main impact is student council. I make an impact on the council makes an impact on the school, that makes an impact on the community. That's how I make my mark at SHS. And I think that's really important for students to find, because I don't want them to get caught up in college stuff. It's more about the meaning that you leave behind with the things that you do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really important for incoming freshmen and also just everyone else in high school to realize that this is a completely normal feeling to have with high school. You're facing this constant stress, and high school today is, I would say, probably as like the most stressful it has ever been. You know, kids are consistently pushing themselves, and it's a lot, and it's like completely normal to get a sense of burnout and need to take time to regroup for yourself. I think we're lucky that we're in a time where we're starting to even like use the word burnout to talk about what children are going through in high school, but I think we do still have a long ways to go when it comes to actually handling the situation and creating environments that are better for everyone. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate getting another student perspective about what kind of the main feeling that I felt throughout high school was.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I had so much fun.
No problem. Thank you so much to Nicole. I had so much fun interviewing her about this topic. And just to close off today's episode, I really do want to reiterate that burnout is a very significant thing that a lot of students face currently. And I think it's really important to realize that you're not approaching it alone, and that everyone kind of is feeling the same way and is approaching it differently in a way that works for them. You know, a method for someone to feel motivated to get out of a phase of burnout might be completely different than yours, and that's completely valid. So it's really just remembering that a lot of people are feeling the same way, and starting that conversation about that and handling it in a way that works well for you. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast episode. It really does mean a lot to me. Make sure to check out the Modern Adolescence website and blog posts. If you want to write for Modern Adolescence, head on to the website and send an email on our questionnaire. And make sure to check out all the other Modern Adolescence episodes. Thank you so much.